What's up, folks? I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, here with a look at the 10-game Week 10 slate here on DraftKings, 11 games over on FanDuel. Going to give you some of the top plays, picks, lineup advice, and strategies for this weekend's action on DraftKings and FanDuel. And you see here on the screen, as always, my favorite play on the slate is going to be San Francisco's quarterback, Brock Purdy. That's because in high-risk contests this week, I do like stacking the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco is favored by 6.5 points this week in their matchup with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road coming off their bye, and they have the highest implied team total on this slate. They are now back to full strength with Christian McCaffrey returning to the lineup, Deebo Samuel expected to play, George Kittle expected to play. So this is going to be a great team to consider in tournament lineups this week. Brock Purdy is going to be a great quarterback to consider in low-risk contests this week as well, because he's actually projecting to be the most popular quarterback on the DraftKings slate for all of these reasons as well. Normal agenda, I like to look at the spreads and totals in betting markets to see which players are going to be in favorable game scripts for us to consider here in Week 10 in DFS. And we're going to look at the running backs here, starting with the Kansas City Chiefs. Kareem Hunt's Chiefs are favored by 8.5 points this week against the Denver Broncos, and it's a tough matchup for Kareem Hunt. Denver has one of the better defenses in the NFL this season. That's even including last week's drubbing by the Baltimore Ravens. They are a top 8 rush defense. Where they actually get beat by running backs is in the passing game, which historically, going back like 5-6 years, that's a role that Kareem Hunt had in his first stint with the Kansas City Chiefs. But you see, he hasn't had more than 3 targets in a game here for Kansas City, so I don't think we can really rely on that. Kareem Hunt not projecting to be super popular this week, also doesn't rank super high in our model, so I do think he is a high-risk only play here in week number 10. The Chargers are favored by 8 points at home against the Tennessee Titans this week. J.K. Dobbins has been a very popular play over the last few weeks. He's going to have to contend with Gus Edwards this week, who's been designated to return from injured reserve, and he is expected to be activated and play in this game this week. So just keep an eye on that for touches. Dobbins, however, has been playing extremely well. We saw a big game last week with a couple touchdowns against the Cleveland Browns. The issue for the Chargers is they have the second worst run blocking offensive line by adjusted line yards this year. And the one thing Tennessee does well defensively is they actually do stop the run. They are top 5 rush defense, bottom 4 in the league defending running backs in the passing game. So if Dobbins gets some more targets like he did in a trailing game script in week number 8, maybe he could take advantage of the matchup there, but that's not what we're expecting to have happen here. Dobbins profiles better as a high-risk play here on DraftKings, but will be closer to low risk on FanDuel due to the pricing. The San Francisco 49ers. Mentioned they're favored by 6.5 here on the road against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Christian McCaffrey is going to be making his season debut this week against Tampa Bay, and frankly, we have an opportunity to play McCaffrey, we think, at full usage at a lower price than he typically would be if things were going according to plan, and at lower ownership. He is going to be between like 10 to 15% ownership here on DraftKings, and we actually have CMC at 5% right now over on FanDuel. So an excellent tournament play here because no one is really sure how to handle this. They're a little leery of McCaffrey coming off of this Achilles injury that has kept him out for half the season. But I think in tournaments, you have to pounce on that. We know what CMC is capable of, and this is a great opportunity to take advantage of it before he proves it to the world yet again here in his career. Much like Derrick Henry, CMC is a matchup-proof running back, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do have a top 10 rush defense. They can be beaten through the air, though, and that is where CMC has always made his name, especially here in PPR formats like on DraftKings. Aaron Jones from the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are favored by 6.5 points this week on the road against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Aaron Jones is going to be one of the 2 most popular plays at the running back position here on DraftKings and FanDuel, and therefore I think he needs to be in all of your low-risk lineups this week. Aaron Jones has not been splitting work with Ty Chandler and Cam Akers like we thought he would be doing this season. He has straight up dominated the touches and the opportunities over the last couple of weeks. We've seen 19 plus carries in each of the last 2 games. See some of the target volume there. The fantasy box score results, though, not really there so far for Aaron Jones. Just 3 touchdowns on the season. I would expect some regression to come Aaron Jones' way, I would expect an extremely positive game script here against Jacksonville, who is projected to play their backup quarterback, Mac Jones here. Trevor Lawrence not expected to play in week number 10. For all of these reasons, Aaron Jones is a phenomenal play, volume-based. Another play here where the matchup is actually slightly towards the defense's favor. The Jaguars have an above-average rush defense, but they, once again, can be beaten through the air with running backs. So really good incentive here for Sam Darnold to use Aaron Jones extensively here in week number 10, and that's why he's going to be one of the best plays on this weekend's slate. Chicago Bears favored by 6.5 points at home this week against the Patriots. That means DeAndre Swift is a great play to consider as well. Patriots are a bottom 5 rush defense this season, and they are also very susceptible to giving up production to running backs through the air. Swift dominating the opportunities for Chicago at the running back position. Going to be a great low-risk play here on DraftKings, profiling a little bit more as high risk over on FanDuel just because he's outside of the top 4 or 5 running backs for projected ownership, but still a great play in a great spot nonetheless. Now, outside of favorable game script situations, more like neutral game script situations that are going to be popular on this slate, and they're both playing in the same game at the Superdome there in New Orleans. Once again, Alvin Kamara expected to dominate the opportunities in this offense because no Chris Olave, no Cedric Wilson, no good players on this team other than Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill, some of the other tight ends there, right? So 30 carries, 9 targets last week, and a loss against Carolina for Kamara. This is a volume-based play, and that is why Kamara is going to be the number 1 owned player in DFS on DraftKings and FanDuel and needs to be in your low-risk lineups as a result. The efficiency has been suspect all year long, really for a little bit longer than that. But when you're looking at 30 to 35 touches at the running back position, we throw all that out the window, and we want to make sure we have that in our low-risk lineups. The Saints are 3-point underdogs to the Atlanta Falcons this week at home. The Falcons are a below-average rush defense, so that's good for Kamara here, but they are an above-average defense defending running backs through the air. 7+ target floor here. We definitely want to have exposure to Kamara in PPR. You get that 5-6 point floor just based off of the receptions, and there's really no argument here, especially on DraftKings. Got to get him into your low-risk lineups if you want to have any shot this week. Bijan Robinson has an incredible matchup again this week, though, on the other side. The Falcons have a top 10 run-blocking offensive line. The Saints are a bottom 2 rush defense in the league this year. That means Bijan has a really, really strong chance to smash. Did not get into the end zone last week against Dallas, so maybe we get a little bit of regression there as well. That helps us get a good number from Bijan this week. The Saints are a little bit better defending running backs in the passing game, which is a stronger role that Bijan has had over the last few weeks as well. We see 5+ targets over the last 3 games, 7 in each of the last 2. I do think Bijan makes a ton of sense in all contest types this week. But in low risk, he looks like he's going to be like the 4th most popular running back play on DraftKings this week. So I think maybe like that first man out behind the 3 that I have on the screen right now, Kamara, Swift, and Aaron Jones. I have no problem with playing Bijan this week. I think the decision most people are going to make in low risk is maybe to come off of Kamara, save the $400, and play Bijan instead. I do think that playing Kamara probably makes more sense looking at where projected ownership is, but there's nothing wrong with playing either of these guys this week. Now, I mentioned FanDuel low risk. I mentioned Brock Purdy is going to be a very popular quarterback play here on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, if you look at the quarterback pricing this week, Jaden Daniels is only $300 more than Brock Purdy, so he actually projects to be a little bit more popular than Purdy this week over there, and I think it's completely okay to play Daniels in low-risk lineups. Similar to DraftKings, we probably want to go with Kamara and Aaron Jones as our first 2 running backs in our low-risk lineups. Kamara is actually cheaper than Bijan Robinson over here as well, so I don't even really think that's much of a decision with his target floor we're expecting. The third running back that I think you probably want to consider for low risk here, this is where I think the J.K. Dobbins in low risk decision comes into play, with the Chargers favored heavily against the Titans at home. Just $7,300 here on the FanDuel pricing scale here, and I think that is a phenomenal button to press on that scale here. Leave you with $6,100 to finish off your pass catchers, which I will talk about here in a second. On DraftKings, if you do not play Brock Purdy at quarterback, I think what the field is going to do is come all the way down to the cheap spot here. Last week we talked about Daniel Jones being priced like a backup quarterback on DraftKings at $5,200. This week, it's Justin Herbert at $5,200 against those same Tennessee Titans. Look, you're going to get those 17 to 24 fantasy points, hopefully once again from Justin Herbert at just $5,200. And I think that's really all you need in low risk to get over the goal line here and beat your opponents in double ups, probably head-to-heads as well. So that is a huge savings off of Purdy of $1,300. I think that's an extremely viable decision in low-risk contests to allow us to pay up for some better players elsewhere. Looking at the most popular pass catchers on this slate this week, he's got a questionable tag here with a couple of different injuries. Debo is dealing with an issue with his ribs and his oblique muscles. He is, as of right now, expected to play. He had a practice with a non-contact jersey yesterday. You see that here on the screen as well in the blurb. So monitor this going into Sunday. But if everything stays on track here for Debo, he will be the most popular wide receiver on DraftKings and FanDuel. And therefore, I think there's really, really strong case for including him in your low-risk lineups. San Francisco's offense back to full strength with McCaffrey, with Kittle. We've got Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings operating in that wide receiver 2 slot wide receiver role with Brandon Ayuk out. So they really, really need Debo to come back here for Purdy and this offense to really hum this week. And I think that he will end up being a really important part of lineups if he actually is ruled in at 1 p.m. on Sunday. So we will have to monitor this through tomorrow morning to know for sure if we're going to have access to Debo Samuel. Josh Downs with the Indianapolis Colts is going to be the second most popular play if things hold. We've seen 9 targets in each of the last 2 games. We got very important news that is also going to make Downs extremely popular in all formats this week, and that is that Michael Pittman is going to be out with a finger/back injury this week. So Downs firmly atop the depth chart here. Value play has opened up as a result here for the Colts at home. Adonai Mitchell is the cheapest receiver that projects for the most targets this week for us in our model. So he's at 3,400 here on DraftKings. He projects for 7+ targets in our model this week. And you can get Mitchell for just $5,200 over on FanDuel as well. Not projecting to be more than 10% owned on either DraftKings or FanDuel. So I think Mitchell is more of a high-risk play at this point. But gotta love the opportunity there opening up with the injury there for Mitchell and DFS. Talk about him every single week. But if we have Herbert as a very popular play at quarterback, then it shouldn't come as any surprise that his number 1 wide receiver, Ladd McConkey, is also going to be popular. 5,900 here on DraftKings, 6,300 over on FanDuel. So he's inside the top 3 in ownership at the position. A pair of New York Jets receivers are going to be the most popular plays on this slate as well. Garrett Wilson has been incredible. Everybody saw the catch last week against Houston on Thursday Night Football. That was absolutely incredible. The one-handed touchdown grab in the end zone. We have Devontae Adams, who's also going to see a monstrous amount of targets here in week number 10 against the Arizona Cardinals. Why? Because Allen Lazard on injured reserve, he's not going to play. Mike Williams traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers, not an option for the Jets here. If you're looking for a third receiver that's going to play more, I think it would probably be Xavier Gibson, but let's be honest here. The Jets are just going to funnel targets to Wilson and Adams. That's why they have both of these guys on this offense at this point. In my opinion, if you're looking for higher upside, it's going to be with Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson has been running a higher average depth of target route tree for Aaron Rodgers, so he's seeing deeper targets downfield, higher ceiling opportunities, also at a high volume. Very similar target volume to Devontae Adams over the last couple of weeks here since the trade. 18 targets for Garrett Wilson, 17 targets for Devontae Adams in the last 2 weeks. So both these guys, very similar priced on DraftKings and FanDuel, both going to be very popular in low-risk contests, and I do think Garrett Wilson is my favorite option of the 2 here if I were to flip that coin. Now, we're going to need a cheap wide receiver, going to need a cheap tight end to make this stuff work. You see 3,500 per player remaining. We have those options on this slate. Want to talk about defense first? There's one defense here on DraftKings that's approaching 30% projected ownership in tournaments, which means they're probably an auto click and auto block in low risk contests. That's Chicago against the New England Patriots this week. So we want to make sure we have them in our low risk lineups. Now, the other defenses people are going to be very, very heavily invested in this week. Philadelphia drawing backup quarterback Cooper Rush from the Dallas Cowboys. They're going to be popular this week. Over on FanDuel, the Washington Commanders at $3,500 on their salary scale against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So those are some of the better defense plays. Those are also some of the highest ranked defense plays in our model as well. Now, $37.50 per player remaining. How are we going to do it? At wide receiver, we're expecting Sterling Shepard to operate as the wide receiver 1 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jalen McMillan questionable this week, so I think he'll be popular. Cade Otton at tight end will be popular as well. Not going to fit the salary build that I have here for low risk, but those are your popular value plays on Tampa Bay with all of the injuries they're having at pass catcher. If we play Sterling Shepard at $4,100, we got $3,400 remaining for a tight end. And there is the Will Dissly play with the Chargers sitting here. He's had very high target volume over the last few weeks of play, coming off of a disappointing game against Cleveland, but he did still lead the Chargers in opportunity at tight end, and I think this is your cheap stack pairing partner with a low risk Justin Herbert as well if you want to go that route. So I think this is where the field is going to be on DraftKings for low risk contests. We come over to FanDuel, we can plug in Dissly at cheap $4,900. We have $6,500 per player remaining. We get that value play with Sterling Shepard. Josh Downs, very popular play. We probably want to include $6,700 for a final wide receiver spot. And Lab McConkey is sitting right here. Khalil Shakir with Buffalo, another good option in this range. So probably should discuss him for you as well. Keon Coleman out for Buffalo this week. Amari Cooper questionable with the injury that forced him to miss last week's game. So Shakir is probably going to be the best Buffalo wide receiver to use this week and right in this salary range for some of these low-risk wide receivers as well. Now, high-risk contests, talked about it off the top. I love San Francisco stacks with them carrying the highest implied team total on this slate. Some of my other favorite options, stick with this Khalil Shakir talk, Josh Allen, and we can get to Shakir at 6,000, easy pivot away from Josh Downs. You see, obviously, just 1,100 remaining to finish off a lineup here, so we're going to have to get creative. Probably have to come off Garrett Wilson, maybe a cheap Adonai Mitchell as the bringback from Indianapolis. Leaves me with plenty of salary to play a tight end, massage the lowest plays a little bit, and move things around if we want in high risk. For another stack opportunity, I love the Chiefs as well. Patrick Mahomes going to be an option this week. DeAndre Hopkins, underpriced, coming off of the primetime big game that he had at $5,300. We got 50-50 per player remaining. I don't think we need to consider Denver bringbacks with how heavily favored Kansas City is this week, but if you do want one, obviously Cortland Sutton is their number one receiver, and he'd probably be the best option to use. We've got the Minnesota Vikings. Interesting leverage off of the super popular Aaron Jones in tournaments this week. We could play Sam Darnold, you already know. You can play Justin Jefferson, $4,200 per player remaining for 2 spots. You got a cheap tight end, a cheap wide receiver. There are options in this range as well. So it's a really fun slate, I think, with the 10 games on it. There are a lot of options for us to stack. We can actually pretty easily get to some of the more exciting quarterbacks, more exciting offenses around this core of popular low-risk plays in tournaments. So I do think that is the strongest way to play this slate. Finally, not going to let you get out of here without going over our underperforming wide receiver list. We do have a modest one this week. The number one underperforming wide receiver on the week, based off of his opportunities in his team's last 3 games, it's going to be Keenan Allen of the Chicago Bears. No touchdowns in the last 2 weeks of play. Before the bye week, he had 2 against Jacksonville. He's got a below average catch rate. That's a big thing that is actually driving him up our rankings for underperforming wide receivers, catching just 50% of his targets on the season thus far, and that number should be closer to like 65-70% at his average depth of target, at his opportunity. And that's a big reason why he's underperforming on his expected fantasy points. So Keenan Allen, a really strong play in high risk, one of the highest ranking wide receivers in our model because of that underperforming status that he has. With Kansas City, obviously, if Hopkins has a big day, that means Xavier Worthy did not. we saw 2 targets, no receptions, negative rushing yardage. Xavier Worthy still had a really, really strong role last week on Monday Night Football, so don't get all disappointed if you are a Xavier Worthy owner in season long. There is still a really, really strong opportunity there. Actually ran the most routes at the wide receiver position last week, and from similar positions as Hopkins. So Kansas City right now is mixing and matching at receiver. They're actually moving guys around every single play. There's no dedicated slot receiver in this offense. They're all running routes from different positions. And Xavier Worthy has a really, really strong, high average depth of target role on the season. So there's extremely high ceiling here at low to no ownership with Xavier Worthy. We have Calvin Ridley with the Tennessee Titans, seeing just incredible opportunity now without DeAndre Hopkins available any longer. Took overtime for him to get over 10 fantasy points last week against the Patriots. Hopefully we get a little bit of a better box score result here in week number 10. Still no touchdowns over the last few weeks of the season, and that is why he is still underperforming his mega high value role in this Titans offense. One of my favorite high-risk plays as a result. We have Kayshon Boutte with the Patriots. Boutte is definitely the cheapest wide receiver on this list. He has consistently led the Patriots in routes run with Drake May under center over the last few games. So he's your number one target to consider for tournament lineups if for whatever reason you're considering playing Drake May against Chicago. Be good leverage against the extremely popular defense here this week as well. And then our final underperforming wide receiver in the late window, a very modest 3-game late window here on DraftKings this week, Marvin Harrison Jr. with the Arizona Cardinals. Marvin Harrison just straight up underperforming his opportunities in this offense, has not found the end zone since week 4 of the NFL season. So we're hoping that soon enough here he can turn that around for Kyler Murray and the Cardinals in this exciting matchup with the New York Jets. That's going to do it for me, folks. Good luck this week in week number 10. I'll be back next week to talk to you about week 11.